to make Houghton-Portage Township Schools a welcoming place for all. They invite us to work with them to continue to drive the initiative forward. So we have Addie Greer Welsh. She attended Houghton-Portage Township Schools for her entire school career, K-12, and graduated in 2012. She completed a degree in dietetics with a minor in health promotion at Michigan State University. After graduation there, she attended the University of Tennessee, where she earned a Master of Public Health and a Master of Science in Nutrition. And she's now living in the Twin Cities and works as a registered dietitian at a nonprofit organization that supports programs caring for youth and seniors and serving healthy meals and snacks. Our second panelist is Boris Busov. He also, he attended Houghton-Portage Schools from 4th grade on and graduated in 2012. He went on to study at the University of Michigan and graduated in 2016 with a degree in biochemistry and Spanish. After graduating, he worked with the Fulbright program in Bulgaria as a teacher and for a nonprofit, and now works for a data analytics company, Tableau Software. He just told us, Santa Cruz near San Francisco. And third, we have Cassandra Van Dam, who also attended Houghton-Portage Township Schools for her entire K-12 and graduated in 2012. She graduated from the University of Michigan in 2016 with a BA in Women's Studies and a minor in Community Action Social Change. After doing 2 years of Food Corps AmeriCorps in Detroit Public Schools, Cassandra currently works as a garden-based educator at a small food justice nonprofit based in Ypsilanti, Michigan. There's a fourth member not on the panel with us today. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it, but his name is Finn Storr, and he also attended Houghton-Portage Township Schools for K-12 and graduated in 2012. He also graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in public policy. He now works as a legislative fellow on Capitol Hill in Washington, DC, and he spent many hours working with the other three here in developing the presentation. So we wanted to recognize his contributions. So I'm now going to turn it over to the three panelists, but we're going to ask you that as questions arise, if you would put those into the chat, and then as the panelists would have time or would like to, they might answer them during the presentation, or perhaps they'll just wait and answer them all at the end. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning, and certainly want to thank our panelists for sharing with us today. So I am now going to turn it over to you three.
Great. Thank you, Joan, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for coming out today on a Sunday morning, Mother's Day. We really appreciate you all being here and listening to us. So we do have a presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Let me just do that really quick. Oops. All right. So yeah, we just wanted to take some time today to talk to all of you about the work that we've been doing, about talking to Houghton schools about incorporating anti-racism work into their curriculum and policy. To start off, a little bit more about us. We kind of, thank you, Joan, again for those introductions. I'm Cassandra. I live in like the Metro Detroit area.
And I'm Addie. I think as mentioned, I currently live in Minneapolis.
And hi everyone, my name is Boris. I currently live right outside of San Francisco in Santa Cruz.
And yeah, and Finn is also, he was unable to join us, but he has been contributing a lot to this work. So we also want to get an idea of who everyone is, who's joining us in the room. So in the chat box, if you can navigate over to the chat box, just write your name, your connection to Houghton schools. So whether you're a community member, a student, alumni, and then maybe where you're calling in from. So that will just give us an idea of who's all here. So yeah, if we can take maybe 2 minutes just to do that, it'd be really great. Hey, Alex. Peter, hi. Oh, this is so exciting. Great. Mhm. Great. I'm really glad that we're seeing some teachers and parents as well. It's really exciting to see. Mhm. Great. Welcome, everybody. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for putting your name in the box. Feel free to keep doing that. We will follow up with everyone also if you haven't signed in yet. Once these the introductions are done, Joan, maybe you can send that out again, and that we'll be able to email you afterwards. So yeah, welcome everybody. It's great to see fellow classmates and teachers alike, community members. So our goals for today, we wanted to give an overview of this work that we've been doing. It's been almost a year in the making since we first came together and talked about the importance of incorporating anti-racism work into Houghton schools. And we wanted to give a framework for all of you just to know about our journey and why this is important. The second thing is really talking about the importance of incorporating anti-racism efforts into public education. I know in the news, there's been a lot of states lately talking about banning, talking about anti-racism efforts in schools. And so we think this is a really important moment to talk about that. And lastly, we really want to find some community members, so especially teachers or parents who want to also join us in this effort. We recognize, as you saw, currently none of us live in the Copper Country. And while we know that we have a lot to contribute as alumni from our experiences as folks, coming from a different city, that really in order to affect positive change, we need folks who are living in Houghton, who are working in the schools, who have like a more of a pulse about what's going on in the community than we do. So we want to bring people in, get more people involved. And we also want to acknowledge that we're not education experts as well. So today, like Joan said, we are going to give a presentation, and then at the end, we will have time for just kind of a conversation, any questions. If you do have any questions that come up, feel free to throw them in the chat box and we'll try to answer it as we go. But we will open it up for conversation. So with that, we're gonna get started.
Great, thanks, Cassandra. So again, I'm Addie, and so I'll give you just kind of a little background of kind of how this all started, and kind of with the disclaimer that it was a very informal network or informal effort. So we've used the word initiative, but really, we're kind of looking for this to turn into something that would be a little more formal and helpful for the school. So kind of the beginnings of this. So shortly after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in May, the three of us kind of got to talking, and we're wondering, we hadn't been in Houghton schools for over 10 years, which is a long time. And so we were wondering, if there had been more of a kind of, work done at Houghton schools to incorporate kind of an administrative level, like stance or agenda to discuss race and racism kind of more consistently in the classroom. So we sent an email to the school board and the superintendent just to ask, what perhaps has happened since we've been gone, and to see, how they were handling the current moment. And they were quite responsive, got back to us, and kind of just indicated that with COVID and kind of all of the other challenges facing them, that wasn't something that had been in the docket or had been worked on kind of at a district-wide level. So then we kind of, realized the challenges that the school was facing with COVID. And so we thought we'd just try to get an idea of what the interest would be for people who have either attended Houghton-Portage Township schools, work in the school system, or were, current students or just locked into that community. So we began working on an open letter, and I'll kind of go through some of the meat of that in the next slide, but we also will have a link to the letter if you have not already seen it, and we'll send that out with the slides at the end, which is kind of one of the reasons we're collecting contact information so you can view it. And so then we released the letter in September, and since then we've had over 500 signatures, and so that kind of shows us that this is something that the community cares about and would like to see. And so we did send this to the school board and the superintendent just to let them know. And again, they're still dealing with the challenges of COVID, and they did acknowledge, that they wanted to talk about this in their upcoming curriculum meetings. But just because of the volume of engagement with the letter, we felt like we really needed to try to kind of work on this in a more meaningful way, and have some current community members really lock in. So kind of what the initiative as a whole is. So just because of the challenges that COVID has presented to the school, and all of the other pieces that our educators are working really hard on, we thought that it might be helpful to create a working group to implement the following actions in conjunction with the school board. So this would be a group of people that maybe has some expertise in the area, understanding of education, that can work with the school board to kind of help meet some of the following 4 asks that we had in the letter. So the first one that we kind of focused on was to revise the student handbook to include hateful language in any form used by students, faculty, and staff as a level 2 offense, with an emphasis on education surrounding the offense. So this would be defining hateful language at a bare minimum of language that is racist, xenophobic, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and/or sexist. And again, with that piece of education. So if someone does violate this, or I guess engages in hateful language, then there would be a kind of a system set up for education surrounding, the impact of what that language meant and kind of how that could have affected the person maybe on the receiving end or people that heard it. The second ask was to incorporate and highlight the work of Black authors, artists, and thinkers in mandatory school curriculum, particularly in history and language arts classes. And so again, we know that there are individual teachers at Houghton-Portage Township schools that are already doing this, but we thought it would be really kind of great that at a district-wide level, there was support kind of from the administration, kind of the top down, to really support teachers who are currently doing it, as well as encourage teachers who you may not be, to kind of implement that into the classroom. The third ask was to encourage discussions of racism, unconscious bias, and white privilege through lesson planning, school-wide events such as documentary viewings and assemblies, and an annual anti-racism training for students, faculty, and staff. Again, this would just be kind of more of that district-wide effort to kind of start the conversation and really kind of highlight some of these race-based issues in the classroom, just again to really give students kind of a broad perspective on it. And then the last point is teach an in-depth, unfiltered version of the history of race and racism in the United States. And so this would cover topics such as slavery, Jim Crow era, civil rights movement, war on drugs, and kind of how history has informed racial inequity in our modern day institutions, and kind of how that path has kind of moved forward and to led us to where we are today. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this point later on in the slides, but those were kind of the 4 major pieces that we kind of asked in the letter that we're kind of discussing today.
All right, so I do want to talk about some clarifications because when we did send this out, although we tried to write it as clear as possible, there was, I think, a little bit of a misunderstanding of some of the points and how we were going about this. So just to be clear, we really support and value our interactions with Houghton's school and staff. Many of the teachers that we had personal relationships with at Houghton, we reached out to directly, and they shared some of the work that they had been doing and talked about how important this kind of work was to them. And all of us, the three of us, and Finn included too, really had like value and look back on our education at Houghton in a positive way. And we think it's informed the way that we, or the kind of people that we are today. So just want to make that clear. Also, we really do like see the school board as a partner. We want to work with them, right? So far, they've been engaging with us in a positive way, and we really understand that COVID has been a kind of big damper and kind of a big focus on the school. And so we want to be mindful of that for sure. And then the last one is, this is based on our experiences at Houghton School. Some people may have different experiences, but we really are coming from a place of just being concerned alumni, and we want to make some positive change happen. Moving on to the next part, just a little bit about why we think this initiative is important. For me, at least, I think this first one like really is pretty impactful. Just as someone myself who has some minority identities, I witnessed a lot of discrimination that happened, and especially to like my classmates too, just definitely saw things happen in the hallways of Houghton schools, inside and outside the classroom as well. And so we really think at the end of the day, this is kind of a safety issue for current and future students, right? We want to make sure people feel safe and comfortable where they're going to school and where they're spending most of their days when they're growing up. And then this was also validated by the response to the letter that we had. So after we sent it out, after sending it out originally, we got a lot of responses from folks who had minority identities, and particularly around race-based discrimination that happened. And later on, we'll talk about, we sent out a addendum as well. And a lot of people shared stories and experiences that they had. And just from the way that they were expressing it, it seemed like even many, many years later after their education, this was still something that was sticking with them. And so at the end of the day, we really do think this is a safety issue. You want to make sure kids feel comfortable where they're going to school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with that being said, we recognize that Houghton schools, racism is not coming from the school. It is not necessarily the fault of the school that racism and bias exist in our society, but it exists. We see it right now, and we believe that it is the responsibility of our public education system to interrupt that harmful behavior and to equip students with the tools to be able to identify when they are experiencing or perpetuating racism or any other forms of discrimination, and to be able to interrupt that. So we want our schools, it is imperative that our schools teach our students how to work and interact with the world outside of Houghton. It is kind of a bubble sometimes. And we believe that we need to provide more training and resources to support our administrators and teachers who are trying to do this work. It can be overwhelming, just speaking as myself, a white educator, to recognize the impact that racism and bias has on other folks in our community, and to be able to interrupt that. It is really important to have that training and resources to make sure that we are going about it in the right way. So through this initiative, we need to make sure that we are supporting and uplifting resources that exist currently, which we also have on our addendum. There's plenty of resources out there to be able to do this work. And we need to make sure that we're supporting our teachers in doing that. And that it's coming from a district-wide, so it's not just falling on individual teachers on a classroom by classroom basis.
Yeah, and kind of adding to that, I don't really love the word culturally competent, but I think that's something that employers and colleges are looking for in students, but at least, students who have a perspective that maybe is larger and kind of encompasses the vast majority of people living in the US. So I think we did a survey of this actually in high school. About half of the students who attended Houghton-Portage Township schools left the area to pursue education or work in other places. And a lot of those places are just more diverse in nature. And so it's really important that students leave school being equipped with the tools to navigate conversations around racism and discrimination and have an understanding of how that impacts life for a lot of folks in the US. And I think acknowledging that our curriculum does cover race-specific areas, but we believe that that missing piece, at least what we felt was kind of missing sometimes in our education, was like that modernized understanding and kind of how that past informed the current. So I think a lot of times, like things are presented as race slavery was a thing, and then the civil rights movement happened and it's over. But I think really kind of taking that a step further and ensuring that kind of implications in our current that were informed by these past systems is really important context when navigating the world. And then this would include kind of having an emphasis and celebration of BIPOC work, as well as providing students with the skills and tools to address their own bias. And then also kind of see that happening in the world around them. And then also just kind of a note that this would be a starting point. Conversations around discrimination and race are ever changing. And I think this effort would just be the beginning of an ongoing conversation and could be made so much richer, I think, with more input. I mean, it's just the three of us and kind of based on our experience, the four of us. But we want to make sure that, it's kind of really encompassing all of the needs of the students in the area and making sure that this is something that could be sustainable. And it looks like Joan put in the chat what the definition of BIPOC is. Sorry that I didn't explain that, but it stands for Black, Indigenous, people, and people of color.
All right, so just a little bit about who supports this initiative. We said 500 people have signed the letter
thus far. If you're signer 81 through 120, apologies for putting your name on here, but it puts all sorts of people. There's all sorts of people from all different types of walks of life that signed the letter, current students, alumni, teachers, parents, grandparents, community members. We were really excited by kind of the outpouring of folks, and this was all by word of mouth. So I think the four of us would easily say there's probably like quite a few more people that would be interested in signing this letter as well, just because it's spread just by word of mouth so far. So a little bit about what we've done so far. So we kind of have alluded to this already, but we've engaged with signers since last summer or last fall when we sent out the letter, and as well the school board have just been in communication with them. The second part of that is kind of, I believe it was this fall or winter, we sent out a compiled list of stories of folks that felt comfortable sharing resources and then ideas from signers in a document that's linked here. And we'll make sure to send out the presentation so you can get your hands on that. And that was also shared with the school board and acknowledged. And then the last bit is that we've also engaged with current teachers that we have relationships with about the work that they're doing, their thoughts and support from the open letter. I definitely just want to be clear, like not to sugarcoat everything, that it's been like perfect and this initiative has been great and everything has been going well, because I think especially on the last point, there's a bit of worry, I guess, that I have, in that number one, I think a lot of the teachers that we had had a bit of hesitancy to sign the letter and just to get involved as well, and didn't want to push up the initiative. And personally, I think that comes from a place that it's not coming from leadership, and that's not something that is necessarily like being prioritized. And so that's one thing. And the other thing that did happen, not necessarily just with teachers, but also there was like some groups where the letter was circulated, and there was a bit of like a misunderstanding of about the letter and what it was meant to do. We're not trying to like say
all teachers at Houghton are bad, or like that the school is necessarily like very racist, right? Like we just want to be clear that like there's room for everyone to improve in what they do, and so that's kind of the place that we want to come from. And we do think that there has to be like a concerted, intentional effort from the school board and from educators and from everyone coming together. So. And then last but not least, how can you get involved? So easy peasy. You can sign the letter if you haven't already. There's a Google form for you to sign it. It's linked here. We'll share that after the meeting as well. So that's one easy way to get involved. And then all the communication that we do is to the folks that sign the letter if you put your email down there. Next bit is we like Cassandra and Addie mentioned at the beginning, we really want people to take on this initiative, and especially folks that are community members in Houghton already, and also like have a more direct connection to the school. I think for definitely the three of us, we no longer have any siblings or parents who are like involved in the school. We want folks with more direct connections and who are involved. And so after the presentation, we'll send links to the slide as well as to a sign up page as well. And we really want to have like another working group that can kind of take on this effort. We definitely still want to continue to be involved, but just folks who are more kind of plugged in that can push for this. And then the last one, which is hopefully a little bit easier too, if there are community members or people who are interested, not only in signing the letter, but also being involved in the effort, we know that there's a lot of like motivated, great community members. There's 52 of you on this call, 53 on this call today. And so we want to get as many people involved and supporting this and showing that this is something that the community wants as well.
Sorry, I was muted. So yeah, now we know that we just kind of threw a lot of information at everyone, and we'd love to open this up. First, maybe to if people have any clarifying questions that came up when hearing from us about this, or maybe reading through the letter, what kind of questions might you have? And then also just thinking about like what is sticking out to you as the most important thing for us to talk about, or for you to get involved in. And these are just some prompting questions of like, do you think that teaching anti-racism in schools should be a priority? We really want this to be a conversation and to hear your thoughts and comments. I think the best way to do this, since we do have a lot of people on the call, is just to put your name in the chat, and we will keep a tally, excuse me. We'll keep a tally and people can kind of go one after another. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can be able to see everyone. Great, and so if you have